Hi, everyone. So, as was mentioned, I am Francois. You can call me Frank. I'm the CEO at Snipcart. Snipcart is an e-commerce solution for developers. It's pretty lightweight, lives in the front end. I'll tell you a bit about it later. So I've been doing this for almost 8 years now. Needless to say that e-commerce has evolved a lot since then. And I'm pretty happy to be here just to share my thoughts and notes on this beautiful industry. So the goal today is to help you make better decisions when choosing e-commerce solutions. We can achieve that by going through these 4 points that are on the slide. So first, we're going to tackle functionality, more specifically, the fragmentation of e-commerce functionality. We're going to address the different technical paradigms that you may or may not have heard of. So Monolithic, Jamstack, and headless. Just paradigm is just a fancy word to say different approaches that as a developer you can have towards e-commerce. And then we're going to try to make more sense of the explosion of solutions that there are in e-commerce. So I have rough categories, old and new solutions that we can kind of classify. And last but not least, we want to help you make good decisions. So there are key questions I feel like developers should be asking before moving on with an e-commerce stack, and we're going to review that. If your e-commerce stack ends up being Snipcart, great. If not, no biggie. We're doing okay. So the goal is not for this to be an advertisement for Snipcart. Okay, let's get into it. So I like to say that modern e-commerce is kind of a beautiful mess. And what I mean by that is that there are different blocks of functionalities that we can find among the different solutions out there, right? So in one way or another, when you're building e-commerce, you are solving for these. So website design, a more aesthetic component, a more UI design driven. Then you are also solving for content management. You know, many e-commerce sites will have a content marketing strategy or an SEO strategy that is accompanying the actual e-commerce selling. So you'll need to create some content, update it, edit it, optimize it, that kind of stuff. Then you have product management. Now we're getting more specific towards the e-commerce part. Product management can be anything from creating, managing, updating, deleting products to setting product options, custom fields, setting SKUs, handling stock, that kind of stuff. Then we get to cart and checkout, which is a more, it's at the heart of e-commerce, right? It's where you have a shopping experience through a shopping cart. And then that's where you have a checkout experience, where you give in some information, choose a payment method, the payment is processed securely, and then money goes to your account as a merchant, and your customer has made their purchase. Last but not least, the store management. So once all of that beautiful interaction has already happened in the front end, when it behind the scenes, you'll need to receive that order, see the different information, fulfill that order, have it shipped to the right customers, etc. Okay, so these are our big building blocks. If we were to classify them or just reorder them from general to specific when it comes to e-commerce, that's what it would look like, with the website design being more generic and the store management more specific. Now, we know what the core functionalities of e-commerce are. Let's look at the paradigms that I mentioned earlier. So we're gonna get an overview of the monolithic paradigm, the headless one, and the Jamstack one. Okay, so needless to say, there are some overlaps between these different paradigms, especially when it comes to Jamstack and headless. I'll explain how. And monolithic is a more wholesome, centralized approach, if you will. So let's tackle this one, right? Should we give it a working definition? We could go with something like what's on the screen. So centralizing website and e-commerce concerns into one system. We'll explore solutions that do that a bit later. But for now, if you want to have something as an example in your mind, a traditional Shopify setup would fit the bill here. If we were to look into how a monolithic e-commerce stack would be structured, it could look something like this, right? So as you see, the e-commerce CMS here is very chunky. It takes a lot of real estate in the graph, in the architecture. That's because it manages everything, right? All of the functions that we have seen earlier, they're handled within that big black box. Okay, headless now. Working definition, we want to be separating product and order management from any customer-facing front end. So that's kind of the most basic way to do headless, or to see it. So how can we do that? We decouple data from presentation, and we make sure both can talk to one another using an API layer. More often than not, a JSON format will be involved in transferring content. So now there are more moving parts to our architecture, correct? The adoption of this paradigm is driven by different things. So first of all, you have modern tooling that is just evolving and offering us new possibilities that were not really possible back then. But you also have a market demand where merchants are becoming more sensitive to performance of a website, for instance, and they are also more sensitive to vendor lock-in, and they sometimes desire to do omni-channel commerce, so to sell on different touch points that didn't exist maybe 10 years ago. So that's why many go headless, and that's why you see a rise in popularity for this approach. There are, of course, a lot of benefits of going headless. You, as a developer, will enjoy a better DX. There's just more tools, customization, flexibility. The backend in and of itself becomes kind of your source of truth and makes it more portable, which is just to say that, for instance, if you find a new front-end approach to delivering your content, the front ends can be swapped, but the backend data source can remain the same. So, for instance, in this graph here, you see developers and editors collaborating on an e-commerce project. The interfaces that they're going to use are going to be more often than not an e-commerce backend, like Commerce Layer, like Shopify or BigCommerce Headless, for instance. And it will often come equipped or paired with a headless CMS. So you can think of Sanity, Strapi, Nadeau. It could be something simpler like Netlify CMS, Contentful. These are the names you've probably heard about. And why is there a coupling here? Well, it's because e-commerce backends are very good at managing the store, like orders and the e-commerce functionalities, the operations, but they're not necessarily the best at managing the richness of a website's whole content, right? Different pages, sections, structures, all that jazz. Now, if we go a bit down in the graph, we get to the API layer that we mentioned earlier that will allow this data stored in our two platforms to be consummated by different front ends, different touch points. Now, I put 3 examples here where you could have Internet of Things, so maybe a smartwatch interface, and then web app, and then a native mobile app. So that's the gist of it, I'd say, when it comes to headless. Let's see how Jamstack is a little different, if you will. Okay, our working definition for this approach, this paradigm, could be that we're trying to separate concerns. We're focusing on fast front ends, and we're making e-commerce data portable. So it's similar, but not exactly the same. The focus on fast front ends and performance from a Jamstack point of view will mostly come through the usage of statically generated assets, right? Static sites or static pages inside of a bigger web app. These are kind of a core component of the Jamstack philosophy. to have lightweight pre-compiled assets that can be served through a CDN quickly, securely, et cetera, et cetera. So in a Jamstack approach, we're really looking for the best tool for the jobs that we have to do. And in that approach, I would say modularity is king. So there is no necessarily prescribed architecture. It really depends on your own aspirations as a developer and your client's needs as an e-commerce merchant. So all of the things that you're seeing here are core components of a Jamstack approach to web development in general. And it's kind of your job as a developer to mix and match the elements you need to create the e-commerce experience. Okay, so we've seen the different functionalities that come into modern e-commerce, the modern paradigms, and then let's try to categorize the different e-commerce solutions or vendors that are already existing. So I made 4 rough categories. Let's call them that. The monolith, the name looks like the paradigm because it is both a paradigm, so a very centralized, all-in-one approach, and a solution. But like, if you were just using the paradigm, you don't need to use a monolithic solution. You can build one, right? But there are existing monolithic solutions also. So that's why it's a category. It's the most battle-tested or time-proven that we have in our industry, if you will. You have some names here, right, that you've heard. So Shopify, BigCommerce, Magento, PrestaShop, Webflow even, if you're using their e-commerce, becomes a monolith. So then we move to another category, which is already kind of well-known too, the add-on category. You have names like WooCommerce, where the core of your website design and storefront management won't be done by, the core of your website design and content management will be done through WordPress, and then the rest of the e-commerce stuff, WooCommerce. So I put on a few here just to give you some examples. Gumroad, Shopify's buy button, Snipcart would fit here, Foxy. There are many others. Now we get into more recent categories, let's say. So the storefront one. The storefront one is a more modern approach to e-commerce where the solution will focus on your storefront, right? So the design of your website, providing UIs and UX that are very much improved for conversion rate optimization and for shopping experience that's best in class. And that comes with front-end technologies that are super fast and things like statically generated assets or progressive web apps and some forms of JavaScript frameworks. So they'll focus on the front-end part of your stack, but they'll give you like connectors and ways to easily talk with backend data that could be coming from an e-commerce backend or headless CMS. So in that category, you have players like Shogun, Vue Storefront, Front Commerce, React Storefront. The last category is the more global one, where you can have a lot of differences between categories. So see it just as a broad term, right? API first e-commerce. Here, the focus will be about product management more often than not, and store management. So you have Commerce Layer, Nacelle, Commerce.js, Salier, Svelte, and there are others. Okay, so let's get into the weeds of it. Now, I have a disclaimer. Of course, there are overlaps between the categories that I just mentioned. I'm happy to address this in the Q&A or the chat or whatever. But just to give you an example, right? Shopify and BigCommerce, who were initially known as monoliths, now have cut off their heads, right? You can use them as headless e-commerce solutions. At the same time, you could also say that Commerce Layer, for instance, which is very much an e-commerce backend that lets you have all your data stored on the backend and then expose them to different front ends. Well, they also have like a beautiful React UI components and storefronts that you can already use. So the truth is that if you start digging, you'll see that Of course, it is trendy and probably smart to position yourself as like a API first e-commerce or storefront e-commerce, whatever you choose in terms of naming. But the rest of the functionalities that we've seen that are not necessarily encompassed by your category, well, your merchants are going to need them somehow, right? So it just makes sense for many new and old solutions to kind of blur the line between the categories and offer a core X, like we nailed this part of e-commerce. But if you want, you can also use this for Y and Z. So if you look at some of them, and not to name names, but some of them will even offer you now a, what I call it, kind of stitched up monolith, where you can use it as a monolith as is, poof, but the parts are all like easily removable if you want to use your own for the front end, for instance. Yeah, so listen, which of these solutions will remain in a couple of years? I don't necessarily know. Is it a smart move in terms of product development, product positioning? I don't necessarily know either. But what I do know is that the e-commerce pie is getting bigger by the minute, and there's more and more room for different niches, different products, different solutions. So it's very exciting to see what these developer and companies will build going forward. Okay, so if we were to map the functionalities handled by a monolith, monolith solutions will have all of them, right? From website design to store management. If we were to give an example now, there's this site that I found called Alfred, a cool site that from my early research looks like it's only like built with Shopify, right? As a whole all-in-one approach. You can go and check it out if you like. Now, if we were to map functionalities for add-ons, the category add-ons, these players will more often than not help you handle product management, cart and checkout, and store management. For instance, that's what Snipcart does. They won't support, more often than not, website design or content management. If we were to give an example, there's this website that I love called Overview Effect. And the stack is, well, the e-commerce solution is Snipcart as an add-on. And then you have a headless CMS that's Nadeau CMS, and the front end is built with Gatsby. Storefronts now. They will handle website design and more often than not, cart and checkout. If we were to give an example, there's this Swiss site, Zenith Watches. The e-commerce solution here is a storefront. It's called View Storefront, a beautiful solution. And there's a headless CMS, Prismic, involved, and then an e-commerce backend, Magento 2, at least last time I checked. Now, for the more flexible solutions, the core of what API-first e-commerce solutions will be offering is really product management and store management. Commerce Layer is a great example of that if you want to check them out. Here is an example, Allbirds, a quite popular online store that uses Shopify headless in the back, coupled with a headless CMS called Contentful. And in the front end, it's a React app, among other things. They're using a lot of stuff, but these are kind of key pieces of their stack, right? Okay, so that's a lot of information, right? A lot of different features, a lot of different solutions that do different things. Some of them have been around for years, some of them are brand new. So as a developer, it can get confusing, I think, to choose a stack. So there are some pointers that I'd just like to share as food for thought for you. First of all, there are existing resources that will help you make sense of different categories or different solutions. This one I built with a friend of mine using Tailwind and Vue. I think, well, it was for kind of a Snipcart blog post, and we had fun with it. The URL is there. Maybe someone from CFE can link it in the chat. It's basically a compilation of solutions that can be filtered by category. And the features handled by that category are already nested inside the left-leaning blocks. It's also open source, so if you want to submit some solutions that I forgot about, because there are hundreds of them, we'd be happy to take pull requests. This one is very great, too, so I advise you to check it out. I think it has been built by the Commerce.js team. So it's headlesscommerce.org. It kind of gives you a lot of different categories of solutions, and not just e-commerce ones. Right? You'll have stuff for mailing or for marketing or whatever. Check it out. And now we get into kind of the core of what you need to be thinking about as a developer. So there are 6 main questions that I want to swing your way. The first one is about DX. So when you're picking an e-commerce stack, are you thinking about your own developer experience too much, right? I think it's easy as a community for us to get excited by the new tools, the shiny new objects, or like that new GraphQL API that would work wonders versus the old thing. So that's all good and fair, but you also should frame the decision from your client's point of view. Like, will this help them or just you, right? So that's kind of always kind of an ego check when you're choosing a stack. But then there are other questions. So the next one is about touch points. So you should ask yourself, how many transactional touch points do I really need for this project? Because it's cool to go headless and you can sell anywhere, right? But if the core of your merchant strategy will be about driving organic traffic through SEO on their own website and selling there, and they don't have necessarily a physical presence in the world, and they're not interested in, I don't know, smart objects or Internet of Things, whatever, well, maybe you don't need the whole headless stack. So then again, maybe just the headless stack's first benefit, which is decoupling backend from frontend, will be enough justification for them or for you. So third parties, that's the age-old question when it comes to web development and picking a stack. So I've told you about different features, right? From website design to store management. What I'd like you to do is kind of identify what you're good at and where you as a developer or web designer can really add value, and say, okay, so we're going to handle this part. We're going to either custom code it or develop it using open source tools or whatever. But all of these other pieces of the e-commerce puzzle would involve maybe too many headaches or just too much time and budget. So we're going to offload these to third parties. So that's kind of it's your time versus your dime trade-off, that dance that we all must do. Then you want to ask about site management, which is to say, who are the other beautiful people that are going to be working on this project? You're going to get marketers, e-commerce managers, maybe editors, content producers, all those people. What do they really need to manage on that website and be autonomous without you having to be involved? Is the e-commerce stack that you're picking empowering them or hindering them? Great question to ask. The other one is about SEO. So the more it is important, the more you want to make sure the front-end rendering of that e-commerce stack will be SEO friendly, easily crawlable, no indexation issues. You want these meta tags to be editable by experts without having to go into the code, that kind of stuff. And the last one that I really like, I kind of called ops scalability, which is just to say that, is the e-commerce stack that I'm picking going to scale well through time, considering all of the other people that are going to be involved with it? So if you're picking kind of an obscure library that no one heard about, that just came out, and you know for a fact that some other hires are going to be made, or maybe the ball will be passed to a different agency down the road, then you're kind of locking your client with that technology that only you kind of can decipher. So yeah, think about this, right? Is the stack well documented? Is it easily adoptable? How long will it stay in place? All that, is security a big concern? Hosting, all that stuff. So a lot of questions, but it helps because it will literally let you eliminate or favor different solutions if you answer these questions. Well, that's another very traditional way to approach things as a developer, but I always tell people to do their research. And of course, here your mileage may vary. There are different ways to approach research. I'm a big fan of interacting with other people. I hop on a lot of calls just to learn stuff and get exposed to different ideas, different solutions. But there are Slacks, Discords, these kinds of communities, CFE, right, where you can interact with real people who will tell you about real experience. There are forums, there are teams behind the products and solutions that you are considering, and most of them are passionate about their work and what they're building and the industry, so just write to them. The best ones won't be too salesy or too pushy. They'll just try to help you make a good decision. There are tutorials, free code camp, dev.to. I mean, it's infinite, right? The web dev educational space. And then another interesting thing is to go to look for social proof. So in your network of developers, do you know of people you respect and or admire that will have already built e-commerce solutions using XYZ stack? If so, maybe it's a queue, right? Or are there any online stores that you really enjoy shopping on or that you admire technically that are successful? And another social cue, right, about what the stack can be behind these. And last but not least, get your hands dirty, right? All of us e-commerce vendors have either starters or free trials or existing demos or teams that you can play around with and see if you like it or not. Yeah. So here's the tiny bit of shameless plug for Snipcart. If you're thinking about choosing an e-commerce solution and you think the add-on category could make sense for you, well, you could consider using Snipcart, and I just want to give you advice of when to do so, right? So our users at Snipcart, they're freelancers, agencies, in-house developers, working mostly with SMBs. They use Snipcart either to sell quickly or authentically online. So for those of you who don't know what Snipcart is, it's a shopping cart platform that comes equipped with a comprehensive merchant dashboard. So the shopping cart platform is injected via JavaScript, like a Google Analytics snippet. And the special thing about Snipcart is that products live directly in the HTML. So they're like a button, an HTML element. You can add some attributes to it, and it becomes like readable by us at Snipcart. And I can answer how we handle security in the chat too. It's a simple crawlback to a URL specified. So that's very simple and elegant. It can work with any stack. But then when you hand off your project to the merchant, there's a whole comprehensive merchant dashboard where you can manage taxes, shipping, discounts, abandoned carts, all the store management stuff you need in an e-commerce back office. So some people will sell it to use quickly. You will use it to sell quickly. So an existing site can be turned transactional in a flash, or custom, where they really want to own the stack that they're using. So they love XYZ front-end framework or XYZ headless CMS, and they want to build a beautiful website experience through that, but they don't want the headache of doing custom e-commerce, and they don't want the closed ecosystem that could come with some monolithic checkouts or whatever. So they're going to use Snipcart, right? Because it weaves easily into their own stack. So these are like go for it or maybe don't points. My Snipcart, for those of you who don't know, is an independent business. We're profitable, so things are going okay for us, and we don't need to be selling Snipcart all the time. So if you need multi-platform touch points, so something like true omni-channel, maybe not for now. If you have enterprise requirements, maybe not. We're a small team, allergic to red tape, so we might have not fit with the scale of what you're looking for. And if you want to build marketplaces too. But all of the other green check marks, so if you want to do authentic web and mobile stores, SMB projects, if you're selling around that range, if you want to use your favorite stacks, facilitate portability, because products just live in the front end, so it's easy to swap them somewhere else. Keep an existing site, quickly test markets. These are all good reasons to use Snipcart. Weird note to end on, but yeah, clients don't care about your stack, right? If you're not using Shopify or WooCommerce, you're fighting against brand recognition and powerful word of mouth in the industry. These are like top of mind for many people, especially non-technical people. So if you're convinced that your stack has more benefits than maybe some of the bigger players or whatever, what you want to do is learn to speak the merchant's language, right? Express all of these beautiful technical features that you love and turn them into business benefits, like talk money, talk performance, talk customer satisfaction, talk repeat purchase, SEO, visibility, all that stuff. That's an important point to leave you with. So yeah, clients don't care about your stack, but I do. I've been doing this for 8 years, and I love learning about it and helping others. So like I said, I'm privileged to be in a position where I don't need to be recommending my stuff all the time. So I'd be happy to trade notes and recommend whatever works for you if you need some help. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm at Francois@snipcart.com by email, THE_FLN on Twitter, the FLN. And if you want to be more corporate, you can ping me on LinkedIn too. I think that is it for me.
Thanks, Frank. That was a really good run through right from the beginning of what the different stacks look like or might look like, and how to choose them. So yeah, hopefully really useful for all the good folks watching. So we're going to go into Q&A. Before I go into Q&A, I'm going to give you folks a chance to type in any questions that you have. We have got plenty of time, so there is no rush, but I'm going to give you a chance to type. I'm going to remind you that we now have a Discord server. Some of you have already joined, so it's really nice to see you over there. We will drop the link in the chat again in case any of you want to join. It is by no means obligatory, but it'll be nice to see you there in between the meetups. And don't forget, in 2 weeks' time, we have got Anant with decoupling the front and back ends with GraphQL. And in 3 weeks' time, we've got Tamas coming back to talk to us about how to create a progressive web app in our paid workshop. So yeah, back to this one then. We've had a couple of questions from Gaston in Costa Rica. So Gaston says, projects in Latin America are commonly small and low budget. What would be a common stack that can be used by a team of one or a very small team?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it first depends on the actual needs of the merchant, right? So the simpler it is, the more you can go directly towards an integration with a payment gateway. I'll take Stripe as an example. I don't know of the availability or the rates over there, like if they're cool for these peeps. It depends, right? So yeah, if you just take Stripe and say you're selling, I don't know, digital assets or one-off products, then integrating with something like Stripe Checkout could make a lot of sense if you have the skills for it, which it's relatively simple, right? And then if you do that, the cool thing is that you're going to skip any related fees that would come with an e-commerce solution like Snipcart, for instance. So that's an approach that I think is worth evaluating. And then after that, it really depends on the budget of the client in and of itself. So you have some stuff that can be pretty cheap if you start looking. Okay, so I'm not a personal fan of eQuid, but I know that they have like a free plan, right? So if you're just looking at testing the waters or e-commerce or whatever, maybe you can try that. Shopify. Let's say you're able to spin up a static website that's looking good, that's fast, that's cheaply hosted on Netlify or Vercel, and then you want to add e-commerce functionality to it. Then what you could look into is the Shopify buy button, right? I think that if you take their light plan, which is not the first standard one, it's kind of a slightly hidden one. I think it's like $9 a month or something. It used to be this, at least. So there are some options like this that I would very much consider looking into. And like I said at the end of my talk, if you want to reach out, I'll be happy to try to recommend more detailed stuff.
That's really kind of you. Thanks, Frank.
Oh, yeah.
I think, when you were talking about how to decide, it really kind of struck me that it's a bit like when you're creating any website or any app, you can very easily over-engineer it.
Oh, yeah.
So it's almost like go for the bare minimum and your MVP, and then see what else you need to add on, especially, you know, if you don't have that many customers to begin with, or like you said, your client hasn't got a big budget and things like that, and you just want to prove that the concept actually works,
Yeah.
then go for the most frictionless approach that you can.
Yeah, and you'll see it for yourself. So the more your e-commerce operation scales in terms of volume of sales, the amounts of orders, the destinations and like distance that you're supporting, the people involved in the operations, the tax report, the more it scales, the more you're gonna start understanding why some e-commerce vendors will make you pay more for some more features, or the more you'll understand the value of, I don't know, having automated integrations with some shipping providers or some shipping fulfillment solutions or some tax reporting stuff, you know? So, but the earlier you are in your e-commerce journey, most likely the simpler it will be for you, right? So it's like in startups. In the beginning, you can do things that don't scale. So you can receive the order via email or via Facebook or whatever, create like the receipt in PDF manually and send it, package it yourself, go to the post office, ship it. You know, you can do all of that stuff yourself in the beginning. But then you get 100 orders a week and you're like, geez, I have no life. And like my wife is helping me, or my partner is helping me package stuff, and I have boxes filling up in my studio or apartment. So I've heard like stuff like that, you know? So I think, yeah, like you said, something people will do also with e-commerce is that, okay, I'm going to spend money, for instance, on a pre-made solution like Shopify. I'm going to customize everything, and then I'm going to launch, and I'm going to just expect to make a lot of money. But like, that's not how it happens, right? You have to have a marketing strategy that comes with e-commerce, unless you're some kind of an influencer with like a huge audience or reach that's already ready to buy your stuff. So yeah, so if you don't over-engineer the technical part of your e-commerce stuff and you just put it out there, then you can like iterate on all the marketing stuff more quickly. And if need be, you know, you scale the site. If you're like in doubt and you don't quite know what to choose, I think it's safe to say that Shopify is rarely a bad bet. So it can scale with your operation up to a point. And why it can scale is not only because of its core set of features, but also because of its app marketplace. So it's more likely than not that if you have a specific need for e-commerce store that is not solved in Shopify's core list of features, you're just going to like search in the app marketplace and find something, right? Now, it comes with some drawbacks, right? The more third-party add-ons you add, the more code that is being injected on your site, the less control you have over performance. Maybe maintenance of these doesn't map your Shopify maintenance. So everything has a cost, but like I would say it's not a bad bet. There's a reason why there's an omnipresence to Shopify, right? Now, if you're a developer and you have actual web development or web design skills, you may want to consider where your value add is, like I said in the presentation. So of course, you're not going to be able to build, well, you might be able to build a product inventory management as good as Shopify's, but it'll take you a year. However, you may be able to spin up a React app that's mostly statically generated, that's fast, that's looking very good, and that doesn't look like a template like many of the Shopify templates. So if you're able to do that, maybe you cut Shopify's head off, you use it as headless backend, and then you do the storefront part. It really depends where you want to shine.
Yeah. Like you said, there's different grades of Shopify. So start off with the buy now button and then see if you need any more.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple of questions about Snipcart, which is good. Thomas is asking, can I integrate Snipcart having Sanity as the CMS?
Oh yeah, for sure. I'll link to something, but we have a developer in our community, Jacob Stordal, that is working on what he calls Steel, which is kind of a suite of plugins for Snipcart and Sanity. So yeah, and there's Vince Perulan that's selling some swag keychains, developer swag keychains using exactly that, Sanity, Snipcart, Gatsby. So yeah, there are some pre-existing stuff, but you could integrate it yourself too. We have some content on the blog too. Happy to share more resources.
Cool. Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, we've got a couple more questions. I just want to remind folks, we do have plenty of time for questions, so please do type them in if you have any. The other Snipcart question was, is there a way to use Snipcart from countries in Latin America, and what type of banking requirements are needed?
Gotcha. So this will depend on the finance stack of your merchant. So let's say some people will often write to us and say, listen, in my country, there is this specific payment gateway that supports this specific payment method that's like a debit or a pay now and like buy now, pay later, right? So it really depends on like what is the best thing for your merchant. Now, Snipcart supports the core payment gateways. I think we support 6 or 7 of them. So the Stripe, PayPal, Molly, Square, Braintree, these folks, right? If they are available in your country, and if the rates that they are offering are fair to you, then I would just suggest doing that, right? However, if that is not the case, we're, small team, independent, blah, blah, blah. So we're trying to help people do it without actually supporting everything, because it just doesn't make sense with the bandwidth that we have to be integrated with hundreds of payment gateways. So what we do is we offer a custom payment gateway feature that will require more coding, more development work on the developer's end, but it will let you integrate Snipcart with whatever payment gateway or method you need that we don't natively support. So that's kind of my answer here.
Cool. Okay, thanks for that. And Margarita is asking if you've had any experience with commerce tools.
I swore an oath not to bullshit people, so no, I don't. Sorry. I don't at all. But listen, I have been in discussions with different headless CMS players. Some of them are on the more enterprise side of things. And I've had discussions with Shopify, BigCommerce, also, not Shopify, BigCommerce. And what I can tell you is that Commerce Tool, from my understanding, is well positioned as an enterprise headless e-commerce solution. They're part of the Mac Alliance, I think, or something like that, right? Fancy new way to structure your architecture. So I think if you need to scale a big project that will have multiple data sources, multiple storefronts, multiple touch points, I do think that you should check it out. But I'm not comfortable recommending it because I've never used it.
Cool. Yeah, that's fair enough. I guess, like you said, you did recommend quite a number of ways in which people can do their own research.
Yeah.
So word of mouth is a really good one. So and coming to meetups like this. So yeah, speak to some other folks who are dabbling in this thing and see what they've found out about that, if they've got any experience of it. So this one's more of a comment than a question, really. When you were talking about the different stacks and the different levels of how far you can go with this and where everything fits together, Gaston commented that Storefront was basically just the external template layer and that they'd never heard of this the Storefront category before.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing. It's in the name of the company is doing it, right? So Vue Storefront, React Storefront, Shogun does it too. So let's say you're an online store selling for like hundreds of thousands a month. You're using Shopify in the back end, and you want a way to quickly spin new storefronts that are already optimized, that won't cost you a lot in terms of design, resources, or whatnot. Then having a solution that is offering you that end customer touch point already packaged and optimized and pre-made, that can already be easily connected with your backend, can be very valuable, right? So again, it really depends on, so what is your team's time, budget, and then core skills, and maybe if they're not aligned with creating beautiful storefronts cheaply, efficiently, rapidly, maybe you'll end up using these storefronts. Also, take into account the fact that many people will love the value proposition that comes with starters, right? So starters are similar to storefronts in a way. It's just that storefronts are like maybe starters on steroids, where like everything will have been thought of in terms of categories and catalog and how things display in mobile and progressive web app and web and all that jazz. So I'd advise you to just check it out and maybe write to these teams and say, like, do you have any examples of clients using your stuff? Or yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So last question then, unless anyone wants to type more, we do have more time. I was kind of sitting there thinking, you know, you and I have both been in the technology world for quite a long time. And I'm sure both of us can remember the days before you could go on a website and buy something. Like at some point that didn't exist. You could not do that. You had to go into a shop, or you rang somebody, or you filled in a form and posted it. There's a lot of talk about relying on big companies for your business now to run your business. So for example, you're an influencer and all of your income comes through posting up Instagram posts. And then Instagram changed the rules, so you can't see how many likes you've had. You can just see there's thousands. And that just changes your business overnight. What are your views on relying on these sort of monoliths and stuff to run your entire operation? And over the years, have you seen examples of where these companies have done something that means that people's businesses have had to do a complete change?
Yeah, well, I'm part of the tech community like you are, so I have witnessed a lot of stories, some of them sad stories, a lot of it's a slippery slope, right, to talk about this stuff. I don't want to get too political, but what I want to say is that the more your livelihood depends on a proprietary platform, the less you should be comfortable with risk management, if I can tell it this way. So, okay, we've seen instances of a social event happening in the world that had a lot of echo on Twitter, for instance, and then as a result, you've seen businesses being removed the right to use a proprietary platform, right? So if that's a concern for you, I'd advise to the research part that we mentioned, like do it double or triple, right? There are trade-offs to hosting yourself, to like owning most of your technology, but sometimes they might be worth it. It really depends on your situation. There's also like something in general, don't be an asshole. It will help, whatever you're doing. I try to live by that rule. And then if I take my marketer hat on, I would also advise people to really consider the fact that things like a website and things like an email list, you own very much more than things like an Instagram profile, a Patreon profile, a YouTube channel. Like there's more control there, right? You have more of a earned audience that can maybe go through time and scale with you. So yeah, I'm not comfortable, I think, saying any more.
Oh, that's fair enough. And if there's two things to take away from this, folks, is don't bullshit anybody and don't be an asshole.
Yeah, that's good for me.
But yeah, I didn't mean to scare anybody with that question, but I think it's something that folks need to do.
It's a good question. We have people writing to us saying, listen, I have experience with this provider. They have, let's take a non-controversial example. CBD, right? So products related to cannabis. Some people have had trouble finding a payment provider that would allow them to sell, I don't know, some kind of an oil or some whatever they want to sell around CBD products. And they write to us and they're like, so we got burned in the past. Like we had a plan. We thought we'd use like PayPal or I don't know, Square or whatever. And we kind of realized last minute that they would not allow us to sell. So kind of freaked us out. And now we're considering using your solution. And can you support it? Like, so that is a fair question, right? You have to consider this when you're picking your stack. And that's where technology just transcends bits. Like it's cultural, right? As for Snipcart, if I can answer for Snipcart, we're too much of a small team to handle all of that legal responsibility. So we kind of offload that decision and risk on the payment gateways that we choose to support. So if someone tells me, Francois, personally, would you mind selling if I sold CBD products using Snipcart? I would say, no, I don't mind. But maybe Stripe minds. Maybe I think Square does not mind, actually, if that may be a queue for CBD people or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, and it depends where you're selling as well, because like here in the UK, cannabis is not legal. Some cannabis products can only be obtained through your doctor and things like that. So yeah, and you know, obviously the internet doesn't respect international boundaries, does it? So yeah, definitely quite a lot to bear in mind. And what you said there about marketing as well, you know, I've done marketing for many years. That's what I trained in originally. And if there's two things you need to remember when you're a marketer and when you've got a business is know who your customers are and know how to contact them. And that's exactly what you said earlier. Doesn't matter what stack you've got, if somebody else owns that data and then it gets taken away from you, you don't have a business anymore. So
also, also think about algorithmic updates to the giants in the past years. In the beginning, you had whole agencies or even like whole projects relying on organic reach on Facebook, for instance. That has been exponentially cut down. So if your number one source of traffic was that, it isn't anymore. It's impossible for it to be. So you need to pay up with ads or whatever. And in a way, so I rely a lot on SEO. It's no secret. I talk about it. You'll find Snipcart good articles, I hope, when you search for stuff, right? But I'm a bit of a slave to Google in the sense that if they push some kind of an update that says, okay, so progressive web apps, I'm saying bullshit, right? So if you don't have a PWA version of your site, like you're going to be downed in the rankings. And if I don't have the bandwidth or resources or just awareness of that, and I get hit and like 50% of my traffic organic stops, that's going to be a big hit on my business, right? So these are all like existential risks that you want to mitigate as much as possible, I think.
Definitely, yeah. I think we're gonna close it there. But I definitely did not mean to be the.
That's fine. I love it.
There, but I think there's definitely some things that folks need to consider when they're setting up a business and setting up a business online. So thanks once again, Frank, for giving up your time today.
Yeah, I mean, I had a blast, and don't hesitate to reach out if I can help with something else.